what we find here is that bullying perpetration, homophobic name-calling is prevalent to start with, and then youth who bully resort to homophobic name-calling over the middle school years, and we've actually found a real causal link between those kids that engage in bullying and those that engage in homophobic kind of bantering. And then we also find that there are strong longitudinal associations between bullying, homophobic bantering, and sexual harassment perpetration. So it's very clear that as you're implementing bullying prevention programs at the ground, there must be a consideration about this homophobic language that it seems to be a precursor to sexual harassment perpetration. And those are kind of your takeaway messages on there. In addition to that, next slide. We don't have time to talk about this, but research is starting to show that relationship between bullying and sexual harassment perpetration in the middle school years is actually moderated by traditional masculinity. And I'll say it this way. Students who bully others are more likely to also sexually harass. But this longitudinal association is strongest for those boys and girls that adopt traditional masculine ideology. Put another way, if boys and girls think that boys should be stoic, not express emotion, then their bullying of others will lead to an increase in sexually harassing behavior, because the best way to demonstrate that perhaps you're not straight identified and heterosexual in response to homophobic bantering that may be in that middle school climate may be to publicly sexually harass another student. So we need to think about traditional masculinity. It's encouraging because it's something that it's a point of intervention in our schools, that we can talk to kids about the gender box and traditional masculinity and its role. Now we're going to shift a little bit and talk to you about what is working. Where do we need to go from here? Have we done a good job? Well, in the first meta-analysis in 2008, evaluated the effectiveness of 16 bullying efficacy studies across 6 countries, 6 studies in the U.S. Unfortunately, only 2 of those 6 U.S. studies were published, and the results are very, very clear. There were small to negligible effects in these programs. If we were to, be more optimistic about whether or not if there would be long-term effects, and we would, use a different error rate and look toward the future, there were small positive effects found for enhancing social competence and peer acceptance, and then increasing teacher knowledge and efficacy. So we have to keep this in mind. If, in fact, those programs or frameworks are going to be implemented by teachers, it appears that if we increase our knowledge and efficacy, we might see a movement. But the reality is this study found that we were having no impact on decreasing bullying behaviors. If we look to the Campbell collaboration, where they're looking at a number of programs across multiple countries, again, the U.S. doesn't fare very well in that particular report, but they also found that programs that are effective in European countries include parents, use of multimedia, and then again more evidence that targeting those teachers' competence in responding to bullying led to significant reductions in bullying in those European countries in those studies. I'm going to speak more to that study in just a few minutes. Next slide. So where do we go from here if, in fact, we're having limited success, although I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about some promising social-emotional learning approaches to bullying prevention? Well, we need to recognize that bullying co-occurs with other types of aggression and other risky behavior, like delinquency and alcohol and drug use. So maybe there's there's overlapping risk and protective factors that need to be targeted in school-based programs in order to address the spectrum of problem behavior. We need to really consider interventions that would target all of these risk and protective factors and help us with multiple outcomes, especially given the constraints on schools to do this type of programming. We also have to recognize the research that strongly shows that programs should address the peer and social norms, going back to the meta-analysis that shows that actually bullying behavior could be associated with popularity or high social status. Next slide. In addition to this, we need to recognize that our schools are changing tremendously, and they're not only changing, but they're just different across the geography of the United States. And we have to evaluate the extent to which these programs and frameworks are effective and whether or not demographics affect the efficacy. For example, in one of the studies of the well-known OLE's bullying prevention program, reductions in victimization were found, but they were only found for white students and not for the large sample or Asian or black students. So we need to be sensitive to demographic impacts. We also need to consider how classroom management skills and implementation levels impact a program's effectiveness. If, in fact, we're going to put these programs in the hands of teachers and they have compromised classroom management skills, this might impact our efficacy. I think we've come a long way in raising the public awareness of bullying, but I also still have comments from schools administrators and parents about whether or not they're really seriously motivated to have a serious conversation about bullying prevention. But overall, what we need to recognize is that research evidence must inform the next generation. So some of the research that I've presented here, this must inform the modification and enhancements to the programs that are out there on those lists that schools are selecting. We also have to pay much more attention to implementation and sustainability, and we must infuse innovation into our basic applied scholarship as we move forward in bullying prevention. Next slide. And one example is there's quite a bit of discussion around bystander empowerment, and so we wanted to conduct a meta-analysis to show, okay, are these bystander intervention programs that directly target those kids intervening to help a victim, do they work? And very optimistically, we found that they do. In this meta-analysis, we were able to find 12 school-based interventions that directly targeted interventions among about 13,000 kids, and it revealed that overall the programs were successful with an effect size of 0.21. That's really good. We're happy usually with 0.13, so this is good. With larger effects for high school samples, you see the effect size is 0.44, meaning that in high school there might be a more consideration of intervening and taking that risk versus in K through 8, which was the typical effect size of 0.13. But the bottom line, this meta-analysis indicated that programs were effective at changing bystander behavior, both at a practical and a statistical significant level. I would add there that also in that paper we found that the shorter duration of 1 to 2 months actually was more effective than long-term extended interventions. But again, that's the first meta-analysis to look at bystander intervention. If we take all of this kind of research together about what we're doing and what's starting to work, we also need to think about when there's that large meta-analysis out of the Campbell collaboration made it very, very clear that the reductions are associated with parent training, increased playgroup supervision, non-punitive disciplinary methods, meaning do not use suspension. Those programs that worked had a component of home-school communication. They focused on classroom rules, classroom management, but they also embedded this material within the curriculum, so it wouldn't just be this add-on, that in fact it was integrated. And many of these approaches were focused on social-emotional learning. So in the time that we have remaining, I want to talk to you a little about some of these promising social-emotional learning approaches. We do know from research that schools that have social-emotional learning programs in place, whatever that might look like, there is a 11% increase in academic functioning. We know there's decreases in disruptive behavior. Well, what is social-emotional learning, which is an umbrella term that came out of a 1994 conference? It really is, the goal is to develop self-awareness and self-management skills in children to achieve school and life success by being able to identify and manage their own emotions and behaviors, recognize personal qualities and who they have in their social support system, and demonstrate skills related to achieving personal and academic goals. The next goal of social-emotional learning is to take that, use that social awareness and interpersonal skills to establish and maintain positive relationships. So we, in social-emotional learning programs, we encourage the recognition of feelings and perspectives of others, recognizing individual and group similarities and differences, using the communication and social skills that are taught repetitively within these programs to interact effectively with others and troubleshoot conflictual situations, and then demonstrate an ability to prevent, manage, and resolve interpersonal conflicts in constructive ways. Goal 3 is to demonstrate decision-making skills and responsible behaviors in personal, school, and community contexts. So we want to teach ethics and safety and making good decision-making to ultimately contribute to a well-being of one's school and community. So really, socio-emotional learning framework, next slide, is based on the risk and protective factors that we've discussed, bullying research, also understanding brain research and the development of the adolescent brain, taking a positive approach to problem behavior instead of just saying stop bullying or intervene, actually encouraging positive approach to this. And then taking a developmental lens to understanding social-emotional learning programs.